Hey, folks, welcome to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Sean. Carlos, we've got a pretty good show today. We're going to talk about breakfast food and the Detroit Tigers. I guess there's only one Tigers around here, so I don't need to say Detroit. But considering our editors often add in Detroit when we mention our professional sports teams, right? They go back and edit Detroit. there's a reason for that. I think it's a search. Yeah, it has to do with
search engine optimization. Come on.
Exactly. But it's always humorous to me when I say, "Oh yeah, okay, Detroit, that's fine." In any case, so how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. I'm excited because you're right. We get to talk about two of my favorite things: food and baseball. And I know, we're going to get into it. I don't know if you want to get into what the lineup is, but for sure. But I want to start off with the food after you wrote your excellent column about Angelo's.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you. Yeah. We can start off with Angelo's just for the listeners,
which is not in Detroit.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's in Ann Arbor. It's a breakfast and lunch spot in Ann Arbor. It's been there since 1956. And the owner, last week, the week before, last week, I can't remember, announced that he was selling. He's not selling the name of the restaurant, so he could still theoretically do that. And although he said he's probably not gonna, but he's for sure selling the building and the property it's on to the University of Michigan because it's right near the medical campus. And it's an ever-expanding medical school, and they want that land. And they made him a really good offer, and he is the owner, Steve Angelatos, is 65. His partner, Jack Jubeck, is about to turn 65, or maybe 65, and they're ready to retire. They didn't have any kids to hand it off to that wanted to do it, that were ready to do it. So it's the end of a run of one of the more iconic spots in Ann Arbor, and probably one of the more well-known breakfast places in southeastern Michigan. They have a song written about him by Dick Siegel. He used to be in a band in the 80s. Dick Siegel, and I can't remember the rest of the name of his band.
He wrote Gordon Lightfoot?
Yeah, no, he wrote a song called Something Over Easy. Oh, God, this is terrible. I don't know.
Angelo's my Angelo's.
Yeah, in any case, he wrote that song a long time ago. But in any case, so I wrote a column, Carlos, about the closing of Angelo's because I worked there for almost 8 years in the 80s and 90s while I was in school, while I was starting my writing journalism career. And in any case, people were interested, not because of me, but just because anytime you have an iconic sort of spot like that goes away, people have certain feelings about it, right?
All right. Let's just cut through the BS. Let's just be real. Why did you write the column? You wanted to write it in December when nobody cares, when it's about to close. Who told you to write it now to strike while the iron was hot?
Oh, you did.
Yeah.
You did.
Yeah.
I thought about it and then thought, no, I had a story in my head that would work really well in December, but you're like, no, go for it now. And I wasn't sure if anybody would care. You know what I mean? And you never know with personal stuff.
That's an icon. And so I want to tell my story about Angelo's because I think everybody, a lot of people in this area have stories about Angelo's. It's a really unique little restaurant. It's obviously like a mainstay in Ann Arbor. If you live in the area, everybody's been to Angelo's. Low key, some people have, I know, think Benny's is better, but I disagree. But anyway, it's Angelo's to me is always special because I'm from California. As you know, you refuse to admit that I'm from LA, but I'm from LA. And in California, even the whole state, there really aren't many traditional college towns, even the older schools like Cal, like Berkeley and UCLA, even a little bit. I went to Chico State. That's a really old school college town vibe, but there aren't that many. And Ann Arbor is really unique like that. I think even among a lot of college towns in the country, it's sort of unique, the way that it's kind of intertwined and interspersed within the city itself. But it was my first experience. My sister and brother-in-law were going to grad school in the early 90s at Michigan. And when I came to visit them, we went to Angelo's, and it was just part of the whole vibe of the college town and how they said, you have to go to Angelo's. It's one of those things. You got to go to Zingerman's. You got to go to the, the Michigan Theater. You got to go to, at the time, it was Borders, I think, on State or Main Street. I forget where it was. but it was like this. Borders are still kind of cool back then. But I remember Angelo's, and the line was out the door. It was like a weekday too, but the line was out the door for breakfast. And I had one of the best, I love Eggs Benedict, and it was one of the best Eggs Benedict I'd ever had. And I think it was mostly because of the bread. It was amazing. I think you mentioned in the piece that Steve gets up at like 4 a.m. He's been doing that for 40 years to make the bread, and it really shows. And it was just every time I went back to visit them, like 3 more times, whatever, we got to go to Angelo's, and I got a T-shirt and all that stuff. And so it was just one of those touchstones of remembering, like, one of my first experiences with like a true college town, and Angelo's was a big part of that experience. Like, ooh, it's one of those things that the locals do. So I'll always remember Angelo's very fondly.
It's funny you mentioned college towns in California and Berkeley, and specifically, I think I like Berkeley a lot, and it's
not really a college town. It's Oakland.
Well, no, it's not. It does. You can tell when you're in Berkeley. It has a certain feeling, and the difference is, Ann Arbor is on the edge of a large metropolitan area. Berkeley is mostly surrounded by a much larger metropolitan area, but there is a little college feel there. But the reason I mentioned Berkeley is one of my favorite breakfast spots in the country is there. It's called Betty's Ocean View Diner, and it's similar to Angelo's and the sort of the style, but it's got a California vibe. And you sit outside and they give you blankets, because that breeze comes in, right? Even in Berkeley, it's not quite like San Francisco with the breeze coming in off the Pacific, but it gets cool. But their food is great. So I think there are college towns that have these kind of spots all over the place, right? Betty's, by the way, I just looked it up real quickly. It only goes back to 1982. So it doesn't quite have the same, that's California though, right? So it's not quite the same.
That's ancient in California, yeah.
Yeah,
pioneer days.
It is, exactly. But
in Chico, we had a great place called the Bear. I forget what the Bear Beer Garden or something. A lot of California, you will not have trouble. Any college or whatever, like the earth sign, metaphor that they like to use, because it's the bear, the I don't know, the animal,
the golden bear,
state animal. There's no golden bear. Anyway, but yeah, it was. By the way, one of my favorite jokes from Mark Twain about San Francisco is he said the coldest winter I ever spent was a summer in San Francisco.
Yeah, exactly.
it's always overcast there. It's a wonderful place, but Cal. And I had friends who lived there. They lived in they were sports writers. Lived in Albany, which is right next to Berkeley. And it was cool hanging out there. But it's not quite that traditional classic college town vibe. So Ann Arbor, even. I don't know. In the Big Ten, you get around the Big Ten a lot more. What's the closest cool college town atmosphere to Ann Arbor, do you think?
There are lots of different kind of college towns in the Big Ten. Obviously, Columbus is now the biggest city in Ohio, but the campus is really nice. But it's surrounded by it's in the middle of a decent sized metropolitan area. East Lansing is not bad, but it's not like Ann Arbor, right? It's also right next to Lansing. To me, the closest is probably Bloomington.
Bloomington?
No. Bloomington's smaller than Ann Arbor, but Bloomington's got a great campus and a very charming downtown that's not far from campus.
That's not a whole lot different than East Lansing to me, Bloomington.
Well, no, there's no... Bloomington feels tighter to me. It doesn't feel like Michigan State's so spread out. And Bloomington Indiana University just feels a little tighter to me. I don't think West Lafayette feels that way much.
Madison doesn't count, right? Because Madison's the capital.
But the campus at Madison is the place that gets compared most. It's bigger than Ann Arbor, and it is the capital, but the campus is great, and the college feel is very similar. And it's beautiful. It's on an isthmus between two lakes. And Madison, but one of the reasons Madison gets compared to it the most, partly the leafy neighborhoods around, the campus doesn't look anything like Michigan, but it's the vibe. That's why, right? It's sort of a left-leaning college town that's doubles as the capital in Wisconsin, but there's a similar vibe. Champaign, Illinois, that's a nice campus, smaller town, but it's flat and farmland. Happy Valley, State College. That's got a nice college town feel. But then otherwise, Rutgers is fine. But then I mean, I don't know what else. Iowa, that's not too bad. But
Ames, yeah.
But I would say Madison is probably the closest.
Yeah, it's funny because it's like the unique part of Ann Arbor is that it's not in a big city. It's not near a big city, yet it has its own city vibe because Ann Arbor's big enough, but not so big that it feels like the state capital, So I think it's a little hard to replicate that. And I love different. I mean, like Cal's great, Westwood is great, but they don't feel like a tradition. The ironic thing is almost the large majority of Hollywood movies that are shot like on a campus setting, it's at UCLA because it does have old buildings and they're selective about their photography so that it looks like a traditional campus, even though it largely isn't. But it's got a cool little vibe, and it's on the west side of LA and all that. And, Santa Barbara, UC Santa Barbara in California, that's one that's also Goleta. That one's kind of a collegey town. So there are places, but you have to appreciate them. And I would say Ann Arbor is one of the great college towns in the whole country, probably. So I hope people leave comments and let us know like what they would recommend as their favorite college towns, and don't be biased about whatever school you went to.
Yeah, no, they're great college towns. I mean, Lexington, Kentucky I love that place. It's it's a little bit more southern, maybe a lot more southern, but yeah, just think of great college, Chapel Hill, right? You've had experience with Chapel Hill, but in North Carolina. But there's Ann Arbor's the one thing that's unique about it. First of all, it's on the edge of Detroit, right? I mean, and Ypsi's right next to it, and then it's just one town after another.
Detroit, it's 50 minutes away from Detroit. What are you talking about?
Yeah, from downtown to downtown are 45 minutes apart. But there's Ypsilanti, and then I guess Romulus and the airport, and then eventually you get to there's a little bit of downriver, and then Dearborn and Detroit. But it's not that far, right? It's not like Ann Arbor's out in the middle of nowhere. It's like Madison. You get outside of Madison, and it's farmland. Now you can go east a little bit of Ann Arbor, and there's a little couple of towns and there's farmland. But west. But if you go east, it's just one big, huge metropolitan area all the way to St. Clair Shores and Mount and then to Pontiac, right? I mean, it's and you feel that here. I mean, it's secluded a little bit, but you feel.
I would say that if you're not from this area and you were to visit Ann Arbor, you would say there's nothing around Ann Arbor. You would not consider Romulus a bustling metropolis or anything like that. It's like, yeah, there's really nothing until you get to kind of the Dearborn area-ish, when you start seeing
you can take one way and there's a little bit of countryside with trees, but then you get to Plymouth and then you're in Livonia and metropolitan Detroit. Well, Plymouth is too, right? Northville. Or there's sprawl, but there's no big 96. And it's one community after another. It's very much communities. What's that?
But they're just communities.
No, but look, it's not the same as Madison or Champaign, where it's just there's nothing around. It's just farmland.
Bloomington, same thing. Yeah,
Ames is the same way. Yeah, Bloomington's that. Well, Bloomington's not. Yes, same
there's
thing,
nothing. Trust me, I've been there many times, and there's nothing around it.
No, there's not. Although it's only an hour from Indianapolis, that's enough of a distance. And there's nothing between, right?
Right.
Yeah. There's nothing between Bloomington and Indianapolis, and that's not how it is with Ann Arbor and Detroit.
Right.
But in any case, I don't know how we got off into all this geography crap. We're talking about Angelo's. You wanted to talk about the menu.
Yeah. It's been a long time since I've been to Angelo's. So my go-to would be the Eggs Benedict. But you mentioned there's two food items you mentioned. One with great disdain, the egg white omelets that some poor person asked you to make and dry, and God forbid there should be a drop of oil or grease in it. You were obviously a yolk. You were an angry chef, soup Nazi before the soup Nazi was around.
They were not pleasant. They were not pleasant folks that order those egg white omelets.
And then there's the open-faced turkey sandwich, right?
Yes.
So what's your go-to? What do you order if you're lucky enough to get an Angelo's now?
They have open-faced, I want to say beef, turkey, and It's some days of the week they have
hot roast beef, hot roast turkey, and hot
meatloaf
pork
on some days, and then the pork, sliced pork, which I never really ate that a lot. It's heavy. I mean, it's good, but it's heavy. It serves with mashed potatoes and gravy over the whole thing.
Yeah, you're a natural low-cal food guy, aren't you?
No. It's just that just wasn't a thing that I like. The Benedict's fine. Steve's going to hate me for saying this, but the Benedict at my house is 100 times better. And
I'll be the judge of that.
No, the difference is, here's the difference. He's got the bread, and the bread is really good. But they don't make their hollandaise from scratch. I'm sorry, Steve, but you don't. And I mean, right? It's Knorr's, and I used to make Knorr's hollandaise, and it's good. It's nice, solid, good hollandaise. But once you make it from scratch, it's kind of hard to go back.
So, I don't know. I mean, to me, it's more about the bread.
No, it's the hollandaise, dude.
And the egg too. The hollandaise.
Well, no,
the
egg needs to be cooked properly. But an eggs Benedict is completely about the hollandaise, and then it's secondarily after that, I would say the meat or the protein or whatever it is. I mean,
the Canadian bacon, that's a big part of it.
And I get really good Canadian bacon, and his Canadian bacon is fine. He also does a crab cake and a Florentine with spinach, and they may have one other one these days.
Salmon.
Yeah, they've expanded.
And Portobello Benedict. It's been a long time since you've been there, brother.
Portobello's a very 90s, but that came around in the 2000s. So my go-to, and in fact, I had one the other day when I was there hanging out for the story, is a 3-egg omelet with mushrooms and American cheese, and that's it. And their omelets are good, but I'm a sucker for American cheese. I mean, I like all kinds of nice cheeses, but an omelet with American cheese to me is hard to beat. Sometimes just American cheese.
Just American cheese. Yeah, there's nothing wrong. I mean, I'm lactose intolerant now, but I used to get cheese omelets all the time and make them. They're easy and
they are, and they're delicious. And then I get a side of thinly sliced. I haven't cut the bread thin because they cut it really thick, which is good. But
yeah,
I have a side of thinly sliced raisin bread.
Oh, I bet they make a killer grilled cheese sandwich, don't they?
They do. I used to make those. Yeah, the grilled cheese sandwiches are good. It's all the food's good. The burger's good. The pancakes are good. It's just good solid food. And but the hook has always been the bread, the toast, the French toast because of the bread, and then they deep fry. You batter and deep fry French toast, and that's always been the hook, is the bread.
I always try to, every time I go to Ann Arbor over the years, because I don't live that close to it, but I always try to wrangle somebody to go to Angelo's, and it's hard because it's North Campus, and so it's usually not close to something that you're doing downtown. And there's always a line, and it's always a pain in the butt to find parking. And, there's just like enough little like hurdles, whatever it is that keep people, we're just down here. Let's just go to Chipotle or whatever. Like, okay. And so, and I did force myself years ago. I was covering the women's amateur or something, the local senior women's amateur. I don't know, some USJ thing at Barton Hills Country Club right there in Ann Arbor. And I had to get there early. And I was trying to get people to go with me. Nobody would go with me. I was like, yeah, let's do it. Oh no, I'm tied up. Can't do it that morning. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to be the sad person who goes by myself. And I went, and it was fantastic. But it is kind of a bummer eating by yourself. So I don't like to do that too much. But
I don't mind doing that at all. That's what the counters are for, or the bars are for, right? You just sit there.
Yeah, true. Yes, the counters.
Sit by yourself, and these days you get your phone, you can read anything you want, but in those days, you could read a paper or a magazine or whatever, or you could just sit and talk to your neighbors or whatever. Yeah, I actually don't mind eating out by myself at all.
You have to do it as a sports writer. You can't wait for pals to show up.
No. But all right, the last thing I would say before we stop this nonsense, not about Angelo's, because it's definitely deserves all the recognition it's been getting these last few days. It's been covered by outlets all over the area. because it is a big deal, because it's meant a lot to a lot of people for a long time in Ann Arbor, and specifically students, Michigan students, University of Michigan students, and medical students and residents in the medical school. And it's funny because the owner has been hearing from all these people that he fed that are now in their 40s and 50s and 60s, right? Or at least 40s and 50s.
If not dead.
Yeah, some of them who've had kids of their own that have come back to Michigan, and that was fun to write about. But the thing about it for me was that you talk about that line, how busy it was at its peak. And it still does a good business. It's just a lot of it is DoorDash now and Uber Eats, or just calling it carry out and pick it up yourself. People don't like to wait in line like they used to. There are a lot more choices. And it's just the world seems busier, and that almost seems quaint. When you went to brunch at any decent place in the 80s or 90s, you knew you were in for an hour wait, wherever it was, right? It's just...
Mm-hmm.
But at Angelo's, at its peak, it's just the amount of food that we used to, the amount of food we used to cook for the length of time. The line started at 8 in the morning we would close at 2 on Sunday and 3 on Saturday. And both of those days, we would cook until close to an hour after we closed, because there was a line, right? So you'd have to go out and cut the line off and at closing time, and then you knew you still had another hour's worth of people to feed.
Wow.
But the amount of food we used to do, and the pressure, and trying to get everything timed up, make sure every order's right, make sure it's cooked properly, and just the speed of all that, that really mattered to me in my young life. It's just a lot of us had places where we were doing some kind of work somewhere, and we kind of figured out how to work and how to be okay at something, and it gives you confidence. And Angelo's really kind of surviving that, and then even thriving at that toward the end. It kind of helped launch me a little bit, and help my writing, and help journalism and confidence and all that. So I think that's what resonated with what I wrote with a lot of people, beyond just the food and the place itself, just the idea of that. Because most of us go through that someplace, somewhere, when we're young, right? And you figure it out, and something starts to click, and then you go on your way.
Yeah, it was really well executed. I think that does resonate with people, and I think your story is just the way you talked about the people who, the kids, you call them something, the hot turkey boys, and they're bringing their kids back, and they're that institutional tradition, I guess, and I think I mentioned on the podcast, I went to Mr. Spots for the first time in the spring or something with my daughter or my wife, and it was one of those, like, they're not going to be around forever. You think they will be, but it's like, you got to go there, you got to try it at least once. So all these little famous places, enjoy them while they're there. And right now, by the way, if you're going to go to Angelo's, I'm sure Steve's probably not going to be happy that we're encouraging people to go. But the summer's the time, right? When school's out, this is the time to go.
Yeah, the summer has always traditionally been the slower time. When I was working there, we always shut down for the whole month of July. Now that it's closed for 2 weeks. Part of it's just the way business is, and so forth.
They don't have Sean Windsor.
Well, no, the other thing too, let me just say this one last quick thing. This is a reminder to again, no matter what you're doing, here Steve and Jack have one of the more successful restaurants in Ann Arbor, an iconic place, relative to this city and to this place and this larger university community. And they're still have these moments where they're looking around and like, why are people here? Right? Why do we have lines? What are we doing? We're not special. We're not doing anything that's, right? Why us? Why do we deserve this? That we were talking about this the other day, and just the doubt that would kick in. Like trying to figure out, and they would just have these moments, like any writer has, right? Like, what am I doing? But it just goes to show you, it just doesn't matter. You hear stories of politicians that make or actors that make millions of dollars a picture, and they struggle with those, right? So
it's a weird
example.
Thing. Yeah, it is a weird thing when you do something that's public facing. If you're, I'm sure you had this, like you're a reporter and someone comes up to you, and, I like your stuff and this and that. And it's weird because it's like, you never expect it. You don't think of yourself as unique, of like, I'm, people know who I am, or why do they read this, or whatever. You kind of just get in the routine of you're doing your job like just anybody else does their job, whether you're doing breakfast and lunch, or you're writing articles and columns or whatever. It's always nice to get that recognition, but you don't think of it yourself that way. But I'm sure people who operate, successful businesses, they probably get that of, I love your business. And there is some introspection and reflection sometimes, like, what is it that we're doing great that, they know they work hard and they put out a good product, but it's when you do have really good success like Angelo's, I'm sure you wonder, like, why us? And it just becomes this self-perpetuating thing. And so that's good. They've earned it. They've earned every bit of it. And hopefully we get to try it before it goes away. It may pop up again in a different incarnation.
It could. That's possible, but it won't be the same, right? It's not going to be the same place, same corner, and have the same feel or any of that. But in any case, all right, we need to take a quick break, and we'll get on to the Detroit Tigers. I think we've spent enough time talking about food, right?
We can't spend enough time talking about food.
Okay, all right. We'll be right back with more Free Press Sports with Carlos and Sean. Welcome back to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Sean. Carlos, we need to talk about the Tigers.
Your favorite team, yes.
Yeah. And
have you been back since opening day?
No, I have not. And you wrote a column that ran on Tuesday, basically saying, "Hey, don't give up hope." Right? They're showing a little bit of promise. The Central Division's really bad. Yep. They could do this in effect. So. Which I agree with, right? I mean, they're hanging around and just one reasonable hot streak. And what are they? I don't know what. By the time you listen to this, who knows if they're going to 3 or 4 games out? Maybe they could be 2 games out. I don't know.
2.5 after as we're recording this on a Tuesday morning, or Tuesday afternoon, they're 2.5 out of Minnesota for the division.
Right.
Lead.
So that's incredible.
And they've been there. They've been within striking distance.
Yeah, they have. They win a couple. They win a few, and then they can't quite get to that 500 humper. I don't think they've gotten the closest they've gotten is 2 under 500. But it's interesting. Not to get back into the Angelos talk, but I wanted to go a little bit meta with you for a second here. So I write that column about Angelos, and I was talking about Steve and Jack, the owners, and how they're overwhelmed sometimes by the reaction, and especially lately since the news of the closing. But I felt that way a little bit about the reaction to the column, and I just think sometimes, why am I a sports writer? I need to be writing about right, because whenever I write stuff like this, it doesn't have to be food, but just anything that's even remotely personal, that's what gets the response. Unless I'm just taking a shot at somebody, or unless a team's doing really, really well, and I just say what I think, and there's so much natural interest, right? But that's not me either. I'm just a vessel at that point. But I wasn't just a vessel for this. This was my story, and so I wrote it that way. I struggled to write that, Carlos, and until I figured out that I could start it with "I learned to write over a grill," starting it with "I," and then I was fine. I had a lot of the other stuff written. I see your column about the Tigers. And you immediately start with "I" and the experience you had in spring training, and somebody that told you, a knowledgeable baseball person that told you, "Hey, the Tigers might have a shot this summer. Don't laugh," right? Or this fall, whatever. So you made that decision to start that way. And I would imagine you did it fairly easily. You didn't think twice about it, right?
Absolutely not.
You wouldn't have struggled with that at all.
Someone hurt you in your journalism career and convinced you that for some reason, when you're writing opinion, you're not supposed to refer to yourself or something weird. And the most universal thing you can write is something personal. Like I just don't understand.
No, you can for sure. You just don't have to do "I" to do it. You can write personal without "I."
If you, right? I don't want to get into a long litany of all this, but I've read some of your columns before where, I could feel you torturing yourself, and by extension, the reader, to go to great lengths to not say "I" or "me." And it's like, I know what you're writing about yourself. Why are you going to such lengths to,
if it's personal,
you don't do that
sure.
all the time.
No, if it's personal, sure. And occasionally I do put an I in there, but I think it's interesting because but people do. On the one hand, you could make an argument that falling back on I all the time it's fair to wonder if it's because, I'm not saying you specifically, the writer's not relaxed enough. Like the writer's trying to announce themselves, like, I think this, instead of just saying, I think the sky is blue, just writing the sky is blue. That's still you saying it, right?
That's the difference. There's no need to write, I think, because of course you think it. Who else is thinking it if you're writing your opinion? It's redundant.
Right. But do you need to say I ran into instead of,
Yes.
Do you?
Yes. You need to put it, and I don't hate it, but I don't try to write about myself. I don't try to write I or me unless I have to put the reader in my shoes to say this was happening. If I'm going to say I asked a question, I just say I asked the question. I'll paraphrase it or whatever. I don't quote myself asking especially if it's a mundane question, just get it out there of, this, or forget the question altogether. Just let's get the answer or the quote from whoever it is you're talking about. The reader's not stupid. They will infer that subject came up and this is their answer to that situation or that question. But yeah, people love it. People love it when there's two things, I think. And I know this as a reader myself. If there's somebody I like to read, I like them to share a little bit about their personal experience, their life. Just give me a little bit of insight of, I was having a fight with my husband. I was whatever. My kids were screaming at me the other day and I did this or whatever, I like that. Don't, when you work too hard at making things universal, you're also making an assumption that is a universal experience, as opposed to, here's my personal experience. It may be universal. It may be widespread among other people, but this is my experience. And I think that's what connects you, right? That's what you want to know about other humans. You want to know about other people's lives and their perspectives.
And there's often universal in the personal, right? I mean, that's what I try to find, right?
Absolutely.
That's what I try to find. I wasn't writing about cooking and all that as much as I was writing about surviving something when you're young and trying to find your way. And that's why people that connect.
The other thing you did in that column that was really good, and I've told you to do this before and you need to do it more, is what a unique experience it is to be a cook. How many people on the planet have worked as a professional cook? That's a really unique. No, not that many. I mean, that's a tough job. I mean, and I'm not counting McDonald's people flipping fries. That's not what I'm talking about. Short order to cook, real thing, made to order stuff. I mean, that's a difficult job. And you did it at a very high profile place, among our readership.
Serving tables, right? Waiting tables and so on and so on. I mean, the restaurant business just in general.
Somewhat. I mean, there's probably a lot more people who worked as waiters. And I mean, that's a much lower level skill thing. But as a cook,
yeah, but that involves a different kind of skill because dealing with the public is its own thing too. But I would, just getting back to your column and so forth. And sorry, we got a little bit too sidetracked here, but it was curious and I wanted to share with you and with our listeners, just that process sometimes. But so tell us why you think the way you think about the Tigers, and are they really good enough to find that streak where they go 7 out of 10, win 7 out of 10 or 8 out of 11 or whatever, and get on top of the division? Or are they just going to keep hanging around, win a couple, lose 3, win a couple, lose 1, whatever?
Sean Windsor's nightmare. No, the phrase you use, are they good enough? And forget about winning 7 out of 8. No. Are they good enough? Are they good enough to win baseball's by far worst division? I think they are good enough. I mean, they need help. All these people, it's like an island of misfit toys, right? Everybody's got something wrong with them in the division. Carlos Correa is near the Mendoza line right now. And the Twins have no bullpen, and it's every team's got either injuries or some issue going on. The Tigers are not a perfect team at all. For sure, they don't have deep starting pitching. They are not solid throughout the lineup, but they're good enough. I mean, they're good enough that I think if they stay relatively healthy the key players stay relatively healthy, the Torkelsons and Greens and Baez and Eduardo Rodriguez, and if they stay reasonably healthy, there's no reason for them to not maybe hang around in August and have a chance. And that's assuming that suddenly Carlos Gray doesn't go on a weird, Ted Williams hitting streak or something and ends up hitting 500 or whatever. It's you have to get help with among the Twins and the Guardians are supposed to be two of the better teams in the division. So as long as those teams don't get super hot, I think they could do it. I don't see them. And exactly what you said, Sean. They're going to win. They're going to win 2, and then they're going to lose 5, and they're going to lose 1, and they're going to win 4. It's going to be back and forth, up and down the whole season, and that's maddening in its own way. But I was watching. I was like, it's always funny, right? You write these columns. This is the way sports writers think. You write something, and I'm writing about the Tigers having a chance, and I'm writing it on a Monday. They're starting their series in Kansas City. Like, oh, you just watch, you're going to lose 19-0 or something, and then you're an idiot.
They won in extra innings.
They won in extra innings. They had 12 men. They stranded 12 men on base. They should have won that game handily. And they start off like in the first inning. I think they scored 3 runs or something. And I mean, they started off hot, and then Lorenzen struggles and goes up 2 jacks early and whatever. But you could see that. You could see the potential there. Baez gets the winning 3 RBIs. There is that, and Kansas City isn't great at all, but you see that they have the potential, even if they're not capitalizing on it. But little things like Spencer Torkelson, I think he had 4 walks yesterday. He is the perfect example of what they're preaching, what Scott Harris is preaching about discipline at the plate, both the strike zone from the pitchers and hitters. But he was struggling right before with pitch selection and all that stuff. He walked 4 times. I mean, that says a lot about pitch recognition and all that. That's what you need from these guys. And it's still a year of growth. I mean, I don't think they'll make it to the playoffs. I don't think they'll win the division. I think it's as the summer drags on, you don't get healthier, something's going to happen, right? It always does. And they don't have a lot of margin for error with the talent on that team. But this is still a year of growth. And as long as you see that, you see some positive progress from Green and Torkelson, you're going to, Maton and these guys, you're going to see maybe hope. The question is whether Scott Harris is going to be a seller at the trade deadline. It's hard to imagine him not being, as I wrote, unless they're leading the division. Even if they're in second place in the division, I think he's going to probably, send some guys going, packing, and get some more prospects and look toward next year. It's not the wrong thing to do, but it's kind of funny how this is the year where they're, the division's really weak and it's kind of there for the taking if you would maybe add some bats or some arms. But I really don't see that happening. Do you?
No, it's the story of the times in Detroit, right? Except for the Lions, but selling at the deadline. Although the Pistons, the fans wanted them to sell Bojan Bogdanovic, and they didn't. But by and large, yeah, the teams have been sellers. Let me ask you about Riley Green before we wrap up this segment with the Tigers. What do you think his ceiling is? What do you think his potential is?
No,
I mean, how good do you think he can be?
Really good. I mean, I think he's definitely all-star material. I don't know.
Is he MVP material?
No, he's not MVP material, but I think he's going to be a solid player. He can be I'm sure they would project him to be something close to 100 RBI guy. He's got power, 20 home runs, 100 RBIs, playing really good defense in center field.
What's he hitting, 350? I know that's an old school stat, sorry, but we still use it a little bit. He's hitting 350 in the month of May so far.
He could
something like that. Yeah.
I mean, he'll hit in the high 2s, probably somewhere around that, but you take that with the power. He might flirt with 300 later on in his career, but he's got nice power. And that, he's going to be a steady influence. He and Torkelson would be really nice if they both, progress and stick with the team and kind of get near their potential. They'll both be nice, solid, leaders on the team. They're accountable. They talk to the media. They play the game the right way. Little things like that. They're both really good defenders. So they add a lot of value. And Riley Green, I think, is just, he will be a mainstay. He will be a really good player for a long time for this team. And I thought, hey, by the way, I'm going to give myself more credit yet again, because you know how much I love doing that. But last year I said, even though we're always asked in our preseason picks, whatever predictions, to pick the breakout player. And I think I said it was Riley Green last year, even though he was starting injured because he had his foot injury. Like I said, even when he comes back, I saw him play enough in spring training, watched him play personally, I didn't see him personally last year, I don't think, but I watched the games on TV and all that. And he was really good. He was really good both, and last year, a big thing was the emphasis up the middle. They wanted better defense up the middle. So he was part of that. And this year, my prediction, by the way, was Matt Vierling, right fielder. He's been a really nice addition. Hit a home run yesterday. Solid defensively, and that's what you need. You need those kind of guys. You need contributors. I know, Sean, you love the Victor Wambayanas. You think we needed to have number 1 overall picks everywhere to win anything, but I'm kidding.
Yeah, that's what I wrote. I would say real quickly, my thought on Riley Green is I think he can be, I don't know if he will be, but I think he can be better at what you're talking about. I think he can be a 320 hitter, 330 hitter for a season.
Ooh.
Not with the power that Cabrera had, but just watching him and watching that swing and watching the way he's been hitting. I know it's just been a month, and baseball hitters are obviously, even the best hitters are streaky over the course of a season for sure. But I don't know. Maybe you're right. Maybe he's just going to plateau to 290. Maybe pushes to get up to 300. But I feel like he's got more in him than that. Not necessarily with the power. I mean, he's got nice power, but I'm not saying he's going to go out and hit 40 homers and hit 330 or 340 doing Cabrera stuff. But I do think that bat, it's just, and that swing just looks like he can do it over and over and over again. He's starting to learn how he's getting pitched. I mean, the other thing too that makes me think that is he hits pitches all over the plate and even off the plate a little bit, right? Up, down. I mean, he can, to me, that's one of the great marks of a great hitter, or one of the marks of a great hitter is when they go get balls all over the place, and he can. So we'll see. I don't know. Maybe I'm completely off base here. But
he could be. I mean, right now, as we're speaking, he's hitting 286. OPS is 754. He's got in 44 games, 190 plate appearances.
And this he's at 286 after a pretty miserable start.
Yeah, four home runs, 16 RBIs.
Yeah, the power
5 stolen bases.
Yeah, he might.
I mean,
yeah, the power to me is not. It's fine. He's got good gap power.
He's got 2 triples, 6 doubles, 4 home runs. I mean, he has power. I mean, he does. No question. You're gonna sacrifice that. He's probably, I think he's hitting 4th in the lineup, 3rd or 4th in the lineup.
Yeah, no, that
kind of flip around.
No, for sure. It seems like they got a really good one in Riley Green, and it's been fun to watch him hit and see that confidence kind of come. And in the last 3 weeks or so, it's really been something. It's been a while since they've had a player start to do the things that he's doing at the plate right now. But in any case, all right, man. Go ahead. Sorry.
He's. I mean, like, to me, especially outfielders, I think they're demanding positions, and I don't see like a Bryce Harper level of amazingness in him. Doesn't say he can't reach it.
Doesn't have that kind of crazy. He doesn't have that bat speed that Harper does. He reminds me of the Dodgers had a really good player. What's his name? Bellinger? No. Mellinger? No.
Cody Bellinger.
Who's kind of longish a little bit and real
Cody
fluid.
Bellinger, yeah.
Real fluid and smooth and
Cody Bellinger.
Reminds me of that a little bit. I thought it was Sam. In any case. All right, man. Let's take one more quick break, and come back and finish up Free Press Sports with Carlos and Sean. Welcome back to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Sean. Carlos, so it's the time of the show. I want to hear what your favorite thing is.
I have one that you can't steal for once.
Please.
My favorite thing was after a few weeks, because I was away from work and traveling for different reasons, finally returned, Sean, for the first game in about a month to the Free Press, the vaunted Free Press All-Star softball team. It's not an all-star team. We won our second game in like a month last week, but it was so fun to play. It was so fun to see everybody. Your BFF, Mike Elrick, who's become basically our Justin Verlander. He struck out the side one inning. I think he had like 5 or 6 Ks. And this isn't a 4-inning game because we mercy ruled the other team. Everybody played pretty well. It was a fun thing to do. Hadn't seen everybody, and it was just, I think I realized how much I missed everybody because I enjoy being around them, but also you get to see and hang out with your colleagues. And one of our colleagues, Marina Johnson, she's an intern on the news side, and I'd never met her before. And this is exactly why we have the team, so we can meet people that we otherwise wouldn't see or have much contact with. And I was trying to figure out, our Dan Afana is a co-captain with me, and I was trying to get the lay of the land. Like, so how's the team look? Like, because I was making out the lineup. Where should people play? And she was mentioning this person's good, that person's good. And she said, oh yeah, Marina's really good. And I see Marina get up to bat, and she gets down in this like, who had the crazy baseball stance. I'm trying to remember somebody who got down really like a Ricky Henderson almost stance. And I'm like, what is going on? And she just starts ripping pitches up the middle into the outfield. And I've never met her, so I don't know much about her. And I'm like, okay. And I actually covered college softball for a while. And I'm like, she must have played in high school or something. Sure enough, she played in college. She played at Dearborn Divine Child. So she's actually a really good softball player.
A ringer. Yeah.
She was an unknown ringer. Yeah, an anonymous ringer. But I was so happy that she was able to play with, think about that, right? When is she going to hang out with, Jim Schaefer and Mike Elrick and, Tony Garcia, so it's a lot of fun to hang out with those people. And the winning's great, but our number one rule is have fun. Let's have fun, be good sports. And I was actually disappointed that we mercy ruled because it ended an inning early. I'm like, who cares? We should have just kept playing just for fun. So it was a really good time, and looking forward to the rest of the season, Sean.
Well, that sounds great. I'm glad you got back on the diamond. Softball's a lot of fun. I wish I could play, but my knees won't allow me. I haven't played softball in 20 years probably. But in any case,
what can you play? Cornhole? What can we play?
I played cornhole at a graduation party over the weekend, but I'd never really played cornhole before. It was fun though, kind of.
All right, we're gonna play golf with you and your sons.
I can't play golf, but
you're just gonna ride along with us.
Yeah, I'll ride along.
I want to do that. Along. Make sure to tell Sam and Jake we are playing this summer at the Michigan Golf Course, one of my favorite golf courses in the area, anywhere actually.
Yeah, no, they ask if you could do it, and they're down for it. So. My favorite thing is, and I'll make this quick, I hate to go back to Angelo's, but in writing the story and interviewing the players over there and the folks, the owners and all those, they brought out some photos, and I probably had one of these photos myself, but they brought out a bunch of photos, and there's one of me sitting on the back stairs of the stoop after a shift. And so when the shift would be done, you could go out and take a break, and I would sit there and read the paper before you go back in and clean, right? Because the cleaning was the last thing you did. So the shift wasn't technically over, but the restaurant was closed and the cooking was done. And I'm looking at this photo of me, and for one, I had hair, and you just look. So I just I don't know how old I am there. I'm in my mid-20s probably, and sometimes, Carlos, you look back at photos and you think about. You get wistful, right? And you think about your life, and that you're a lot closer at our age. You're a lot closer to the end of it than you are the beginning of it. And photos can have that effect for sure. I mean, music can take you back. I mean, all sorts of things smells, tastes, all that. But so anyway, I'm looking at that photo, and it just felt like, yeah, that was that was a great time in a lot of ways. It was a tough time, but I learned a lot. But I'm okay with where I'm at now, you know. And I like it when I don't feel like, oh my God, where's life going? My kids are growing. There was just a nice relative calm looking at that photo. Sure, I'd love to be 195 pounds or whatever it was I was in that photo with a big old head of hair, and, you know. And I still wish I had that T-shirt in that photo. It says "Don't mess with Texas." but no.
By the way, what paper were you reading? Be honest.
I don't know which one that was. I read a bunch of papers at that point. There used to be a store. There's still a store in Ann Arbor. They're called the Blue Front over near campus, and they would sell newspapers. You could get the Sunday papers from all the big metro dailies around the country. It was great. But I used to read both Detroit papers, the Ann Arbor News, the New York Times, and then I would mix in others, the Dallas Morning News, say, or the New Orleans Times-Picayune, or I just read papers all over the country. So I would bet you that was either the Ann Arbor News or the Free Press.
It definitely looked like the Ann Arbor News to me, just from the ads on the back.
Those were the two I read the most. I read the News too, but yeah, you know, back in those days, a lot of people read more than, you know, you read a couple of papers a day.
Oh yeah.
It's how you kept up. It was, I think CNN was probably around then, but the whole idea of 24-hour news was still relatively new, and that's just how you get your news. But no, I enjoyed looking at that that photo, thinking about just reading the paper and those times and the journey. And sometimes a photo can do that, make you think, you know, about how fortunate you've been and that sort of thing. So yeah, that was my favorite thing. Just seeing that photo.
I love
that we ran in our paper. Yeah.
I love that photo so much. And unfortunately, we ran it online with your column, but not in the paper. And to me, and I used to be a newspaper designer, you know, very low level, but I would have stripped your column across the top of the paper that day with that photo, a couple of columns large. I wouldn't have had a problem making it the main photo. They call it the main art of the section, because it's such a fantastic photo, but also it exactly encapsulates what you're writing about, that you learned how to write working at Angelo's and under all that pressure. I love that photo, and it was so old school, grainy, black and white. So go look at Sean Windsor's column, and just for that photo alone, it's a beautiful.
It's amazing how many comments I've gotten about that photo. Just people are like, they were giving me a hard time on the other podcast we do with Mike Elrick, the Soul of Detroit, about how I looked fetching, and Mike's like, I can't. What beast crawled into that body and turned into what you are today? You know? But I think people are surprised when they see that photo,
like a tarantula molting. Yeah,
right. It's just. Yeah,
well, I thought about that picture. What year is that picture taken? Do you think? Right around
probably 92 or 93, maybe somewhere in there.
So there's a chance that a young, dashing Carlos would have been visiting Ann Arbor at that time, having Angelo's, and we would have been walking, my sister and brother-in-law and I would have been walking back to her car past that stoop, and I could have looked over at you and said, who is this douchey hippie sitting on the back steps of this restaurant? He should get a job or something. I wouldn't have.
And I would say to you, okay, I've been trying to teach you about human nature for a long, long time. And if you thought I looked like a hippie, then you don't know what a hippie looked like. So that's the first.
Ann Arbor hippie.
Yeah, and I've never been called a douchey before at all. But no, I used to look at hippies and then I just think, oh yeah, no, I had a don't mess with. I mean, my hair wasn't even that long, really. I just had some hair.
You had hair.
I looked more like Rick Ocasek, the lead singer from the Cars. That's a terrible reference in any case.
All right, you're wearing hipster glasses before hipster glasses were a thing.
Yeah, but they weren't hippie glasses, right?
Yeah, so, no. Hippies can't afford glasses.
Always makes you think of that sign, hippies use the back door. I always love that. All right, let's wrap this up, my man. We got people to thank. I want to thank you. It's always a pleasure. Who else do we want to thank? The listeners.
No.
Can we start with the listeners? We always start with everybody else.
You're right.
The listeners are the most important. So let's thank the listeners. Let's thank our editor, who makes this possible. Producer. I like to think of him as an editor too. Robin Chan.
That's a demotion.
Sports
Producer's
editor.
Way better.
Pardon me.
Producer's way higher title than editor.
Yeah, you're right. Sorry, Robin. Let's thank our sports editor, Kirkland Crawford, our interim executive editor, Anjanette Delgado. Who else do we need to thank? Anybody?
Angelo's for feeding you one last time.
Angelo's for feeding me one last time. And then, Carlos, we can find this where?
Anywhere you find your podcast. I don't know how you found it now if you didn't already know where to find it, but Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your favorite podcast. And please don't forget to subscribe, like, and rate us and let us know what you think. And let us know what is indeed the best college town. By the way, in the break, I Googled best college town in Google, and Ann Arbor did come up number one. So right behind Madison, Wisconsin, right behind it. So
yeah, those are the two. Yeah, for sure. So, all right, my man, it was a pleasure. It was fun. And until next week, right?
Yeah.
When we are back with more Free Press Sports with Carlson Shaw.